Let's write the equations of these lines. So remember, we want to do this in slope-intercept form, and the way slope-intercept form looks is y equals mx plus b. So we attach our slope as the coefficient to the x, and we add our y-intercept as the constant at the end of our equation. So if the slope of a line is -3, all right, y equals -3x, and then the y-intercept is 7 plus 7. Let's try another one. If the slope of a line is 1/2, okay, 1/2 x, and the y-intercept is -8, minus 8. It really is that simple. We're just attaching the slope as the coefficient on the x, and the y-intercept is the constant at the end of the equation. Now it's asking us to get the equations of the lines in slope-intercept form. Well, when I see these lines, I have 2 points on the lines, and because I have 2 points, I get the slope. And these lines both cross the y-intercept at a really convenient point. So remember, slope-intercept form looks like y equals mx plus b. So our slope is going to be attached to the x as a coefficient, and our y-intercept will go at the end as a constant. So let's try this first one. Y equals, what's our slope? Well, we go up 1 over 3, so 1 over 3x. That's our slope, 1/3. And it looks like we have a y-intercept of +2, so +2. For this next equation, let's see, what's our slope? It looks like we go down 2 and then over 1. So our slope is down 2 over 1. Well, we don't really have to write the over 1. So down 2 over 1x, and we're starting at a y-intercept of +3, +3. Perfect. This is where things start to get a little bit tricky. If you do not know how to rearrange equations, this is going to be a big, big problem. So, rearranging equations, the ability to rearrange equations is huge for us in Math 10C. That is phenomenally big. If you do not know how to rearrange equations, you have to go learn it, or you have to go talk to somebody and see how we can do it. Find the slope and the y-intercept for the following. Well, if we want the slope and we want the y-intercept, get it into y-intercept, slope-intercept. So slope-intercept looks like y equals mx plus b. Get y by itself. That's what this question is really asking you to do. It's asking you to get y by itself. No problem. We can get y by itself. How are we going to do that here? Well, if I want to get y by itself, I want to move the 2x term over to the other side. So I'll subtract 2x from both sides. So I'm left with 3y equals -2x plus 6. And then now, if I want to get y by itself here, I'm going to have to divide by 3 on both sides of the equation. So I'm going to get y equals -2/3 x plus 6 over 3 is 2. Perfect. So what's our slope? Well, our slope is -2/3, and our y-intercept is +2. So by getting things into y equals mx plus b, think get y by itself. When we get y by itself, we can easily identify the slope and the y-intercept every time. Let's try another example. We want to get y by itself, so we're going to have to move our 4x term to the other side. I'm going to add 4x to both sides of the equation. I'm left with 3y equals 4x plus 60. And then I want to divide by 3, and then I'm going to divide by 3. So I'm going to get y equals, well, 4/3 x, 4/3 x, and 60 divided by 3 is 20. So that's in y equals mx plus b form. What's the slope? Well, the slope is always the coefficient on the x, so 4/3. And the y-intercept is always the constant, so the y-intercept is positive 20. Let's try a couple more examples. So we want to get these into y equals mx plus b. Remember, get y by itself. Isolate for y. Now there's a bunch of different ways that we could do this. For this example here, there's a couple different ways. I could notice that my y is negative, so I could move it over to the other side to make it positive, or I could move everything else over to the other side and then divide by a negative. And that's the way that we're going to do this example. So I want to get y by itself. I'm going to move the 2x over to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. They're going to cancel. And I'm going to end up with negative y is negative 2x plus 4. And my y is not isolated. My y is not by itself because there's a negative sign here that's attached to it. There's a coefficient there. So what I have to do is I can either multiply or divide everything by negative 1. So the negative and the negative cancel out. I'm left with y equals negative divided by a negative is positive 2x. And positive 4 divided by negative 1 is negative 4. So our slope, again, is our coefficient, and our y-intercept is that constant, negative 4. Let's try the next one. Hopefully you can recognize that there's nothing on the other side of this equation. So if we, instead of moving the 11x over and moving the 28 over, well, we could just move the 7y over if we wanted to. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 7y. So that means 7y equals 11x minus 28. Oops, sorry about that. And then now all we have to do in order to get y by itself is divide by 7, divide by 7. So y equals 11/7 x minus 28 divided by 7 is 4. So our slope is 11/7 and our y-intercept is negative 4. So if we want to graph an equation, the best way to graph that equation is by putting it in y equals mx plus b form. Remember, slope-intercept form looks like y equals mx plus b. So if we want to graph an equation, we'll put it into slope-intercept form because then we can easily identify what the slope and what the intercept is and then graph it. How do we get things into slope-intercept form? We get the y by itself. So let's isolate for our y. If we want to isolate for our y, we're going to have to move the 4x over. So I'm going to subtract 4x on both sides. Subtract 4x, subtract 4x. And I'm going to end up with 2y equals negative 4x plus 10. And then how do I get y by itself here? Well, it's being multiplied by 2. So in order to get rid of the multiply by 2, I got to divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. So I'm going to end up with y equals negative 2x, right? Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. Well, what's going on here? Looks like we have a slope of negative 2, and we have a y-intercept of positive 5. So if we want to graph this, that's no problem at all. We got to start at the y-intercept. So we'll start at a y-intercept of positive 5, and our slope means go down 2 over 1. So down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. And we could go the other way. We could go up 2, back 1, up 2, back 1 if we wanted to. And then we just got to draw our line now. Good. So this is y equals negative 2x plus 5.